Sachin is a mobility thought leader. He has been working on mobility even before iPhone was launched. He has created several mobility products and solutions, and also solutions company in the past, and now heads the technology leadership of Saxon Global in business intelligence and mobility space. Sachin?
Thanks, Mahima. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar on native versus HTML5 versus hybrid development approach for your mobile applications. So this topic might look very straightforward or older topic. However, it is still very, very relevant even till today. And I will explain in detail why it is so important for you to decide what is the right approach for your enterprise mobility initiative. So just to give you a background, what we'll be covering in this webinar is, what are we talking about? Some of you might be very well aware about these approaches. Some of you might not know much about these approaches. So we'll talk about it. What exactly are they? Why are they different? We'll also talk about market overview. When I say market, what I mean is that industry practices, who's taking what route, why they are taking that route. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the parameters which are extremely important for deciding which route to go after. And then we have tried to come up with an interesting decision-making roadmap by which if you follow that, you should be able to reach to a meaningful judgment that which approach might be best for your enterprise mobility initiatives. And then we'll take a opportunity to talk about a little bit about the organization, our experiences, and how do we help. And as Mahima said, at the end of it, we'll take some questions. If you expect something more, something beyond what is being mentioned here, please feel free to raise it in the QA session. I'll be happy to answer that. Moving on to the next slide. So let's talk about what is the native app, what is hybrid app, what is HTML5 app, right? So native app is one of the oldest format of apps. When I say oldest, it's only about as old as age of iPhone. So it's not really that old, but in the fast-moving world today, I think this is the oldest approach which is available for application development. This is the same style which you have been seeing throughout the years. The moment you go to a iPhone or Android or Windows phone, most of the apps you might end up seeing are actually native apps. They are built using specific platforms and technologies, and they are completely incompatible to each other. When I say that incompatible, means when you build an application for iPhone, it doesn't work on Android. When you build for Android, it doesn't work on Windows, and so on and so forth. Now, there were so many technologies which came up when the native app started, and it was extremely hard for the companies to identify developers who could provide them with the quality development in the native approach. So a lot of people started thinking that we have a lot of web. For instance, web resolution has been pretty old. Web evolution happened in 90s, and mobile evolution is happening in 2006-7 onwards. So we had a lot of expert people in the web technologies, but not in mobility. So companies started to find out ways how can we leverage that expertise to build mobile applications, and that's where the hybrid app and HTML5 apps were built. So HTML5 app is nothing but a website. Yes, it's nothing but a website because it doesn't require any app installation on the phone. If you just open a phone, a browser, and in the URL you type, it will open up a page which might be optimized for the mobile. If it is optimized for mobile, only about the screen size, we are also talking about nice touch and flow kind of animations. You can swipe, you can go down, you can navigate to next page without really having to use the browser controls. That's HTML5. And is that hybrid is a combination of both. In this, basically, you use the HTML5 because internally, where you have a lot of dynamic content, but outside you use a browser which is actually built into a native app. So it's like a envelope around the HTML5 app. Moving on to the next slide. Let's talk about some interesting examples, which we have come across in the industry. Um, so Mark Zuckerberg has famously quoted that the biggest mistake they made in the journey of Facebook was to actually rely on HTML5 apps. Then I don't know if some of you might have used Facebook, a couple of years back. At that time, the Facebook app used to be very, very sluggish, and the ratings used to be as low as 3 stars in most of the app stores. But later on, they moved on from HTML5 approach to a native approach, and now the ratings are healthy. The app is very snappy. It's very easy to use. I'm not trying to downplay HTML5. I'm just telling that it's so important for a business to decide which approach is right for them, because once you make mistake and then correct it, it's pretty costly. Now let's look at Twitter. Twitter, at the other hand, uses a hybrid approach. It doesn't use a native app as yet. They use hybrid approach. Similarly, if you look at LinkedIn, LinkedIn also has followed the same route of Facebook. They used to be sluggish app. Now they have moved to a native app, which is pretty fast and user friendly. Now let's look at HTML5. Who is using HTML5? Not everybody is moving away from HTML5. Some of them are actually using HTML5 a lot, especially if you look at any e-commerce site. They might have their apps, but at the same time, they will have their HTML5 apps also. So you can call them apps or you can call them mobile websites. That's your call, but they are finally built on the same technology, which is HTML5. Now let's look at data. This data is from VentureBeat, and if you look at these two charts, the first one, in this, people actually moved from the native to HTML5. So 40% of the people actually they started building native application, and they realized no, this is not the right approach. I probably would rather move to HTML5. So you want to avoid that mistake. It's pretty expensive mistake because you end up spending your time, resources, and money, and then you discover this is not the best approach. So it's pretty risky from that point of view. Now, if you look at the same way, other way around, that people started building an HTML5 or hybrid app, and they realize, oh no, you know what, this is not going to work for us, and then they migrate to 31% people actually migrate to native application after they start with HTML5. So that tells you why I'm trying to show this slide is that to let you know that why it is so important for you to decide beforehand, before you start jumping on the technology part, you decide what the right approach, or else you will end up, delaying your whole by several weeks or even months. Another interesting data I have is, if you look at here, again, if you look at the data which is, US-based data, talking about the consumer behavior. If you look here, the red line is talking about the consumers who are using more and more of native applications, and the green one is the one which are using more of HTML5. So now this data indicates that more and more people are spending time on the native application as against on HTML5. So the graph is going slowly down. At the same time, I don't expect it to follow this trend for too long. See, personally, I am a very big fan of native applications as against HTML5, but at the same time, I understand the value HTML5 can bring to a consumer and a business.
We're experiencing some noise reduction in here. Request all of you to kindly keep your phones and your systems on mute, please.
Okay, continue. So now, the moment you start thinking about a mobility, initiative, enterprise mobility initiative, there's too many thoughts which come to us. Typically, right? We start thinking about what do we want to do with mobility first of all, and then we start talking about the cost. It is going to be very expensive. And development time, how long will it take? ROI, is there a sufficient return of investment? Do we really do that? If I have to do this, which platform to support? Will it be able to manage, meet my enterprise security requirement? Will I be able to support BYOD? These kind of questions start coming to us, and then, these things take over as compared to technology. So we'll talk about that. We'll try to cover most of these parameters and mention which one is right when you start thinking about a enterprise mobility initiative. Moving on to the next slide. Now, this is a very simple chart we have tried to explain. This covers two most important parameters when you decide two most important based on which you decide which approach is right for you. If you look here in this section, there are there are two axes. One is for the multiple platform, other one is at the single platform. So when you're starting something, you will want to decide that you want to reach out to what number of platforms. You want to support only iOS, only Android, only Windows, all of them, or even more than those with BlackBerry, and there are many more platforms coming up from Samsung, LG, from Intel. You want to support those, or you want to focus on limited set of platforms or one or two platforms. Other one is that capability. So you must be wondering why capability is a parameter. And as a business owner, as a decision maker, you might want to be, you might want to have all the capability. But at the same time, if you look at closely to most of the applications do not require phone-specific capability. Let me give you some examples. So, for example, I think a lot of us use WhatsApp these days. WhatsApp allows us to take pictures and post them. So imagine if WhatsApp was on your PC instead of on your phone, how would you share a picture? You'll probably click on browse, or you will select a picture and then you will say send, right? But in the case of phone, you'll probably do it very differently. In the case of phone, it will give you an option. Do you want to click a picture now? Because the phone already has a camera. So the moment you click it, you can say, okay, yes, you can click a picture and share it. Now that is capability. That is capability of the phone, which is not present on the PC. So HTML5 applications are primarily built which do not use some of these capabilities which are native to a phone. But again, your application might not even require this. So you don't have to worry about it too much. But you need to be sure. So now let's look at this section again. So if you are supporting single platform, let's say you pick up iOS, and you want to have all kind of capabilities from photograph to Bluetooth, let's say, or something else, you would rather build a native application. Why native? Because only native application can meet those requirements. And if you look at other way, if you want to support iOS, Android, Windows, and then you want to still have capability, then you have to smartly break up your application in two parts. It will have some native parts, it will have some HTML5 based parts. Now, why hybrid in this case? Why not native? You could do everything with native as well. Yes, for sure. But at the same time, in the case of native, you will end up building applications those many times as many platforms you support. In the case of hybrid, you wouldn't be doing that. Only for the small part of native components, you'll be building differently for different platforms. Otherwise, more or less your code and development effort will be same. So in all, your development time and development effort both goes down significantly if you choose to use hybrid apps. Now, if you look at otherwise HTML5, now HTML5 is the case, the classic case of, let's say, e-commerce websites. So if you are going to go to Amazon or other e-commerce websites, you will find that they are actually built using HTML5 technologies. In fact, Amazon has gone one step ahead. They try to build their own framework for JavaScript and jQuery along with HTML5, so they could use it for their own development. And the reason for that has been that HTML5 still is evolving. It still has some challenges related to performance. The way you can do things very fast in native applications, you may not be able to do all of that in HTML5. So capability is one thing, and the speed and performance is another. In the case of HTML5, speed is also a concern, but we believe over a period of time, this concern will get sorted out, and HTML5 will get more efficient with time. Moving on to the next slide. Now here, we've tried to cover up most of the important features. If you notice here, there are two of the features which are actually put in bold. I will mention why they are in bold. So let's look at one by one all the features. Let's look at performance. As I mentioned in the previous slide, the native applications are typically high performance. They are very fast to use. Again, they should be designed well. They should be developed well. Otherwise, even native app cannot perform well. If you look at hybrid apps are typically, it's a combination. Depends on what section you are. They might be fast and slow. HTML5 is relatively slower. For instance, let's take an example. Like slow means what here? Let's say you are visiting a photo gallery, and if you're doing it native in HTML5, in case of native, when you swipe from one to another one, it will be very fast. Instantly, you can move from one picture to another. At the same time, in HTML5, you might feel, a few milliseconds of delay when you navigate from one picture to another. So that's what I mean by performance. Now let's look at multi-touch. So native do have multi-touch. iPhone, Android have become so popular because of multi-touch. One of the reasons is that hybrid you can do that. In HTML5, you generally cannot do that. Some platforms might still support it differently, but it's not a universal feature. Then you say device access. Device access means the features, the native features. Again, as you can see, the native has all the features. Hybrid is almost, and then HTML5 has a few. Now, this is another one, very important one, which is secure storage. And that is for native allows you all kind of security you can think of when you build your application. In hybrid, since you have native components, you can do that too. But in the case of HTML5, it is not possible as of now. So the access, the storage which is used by HTML5, which is basically nothing but a browser-based application, it has a common storage shared across multiple HTML5 apps. So security is always a risk there. Now connectivity-wise, if you look at online, offline, typically all of them support everything, but generally speaking, the online is, the native supports online, offline both, equally well. Hybrid also supports both well. But HTML5, since they are browser-based, they are typically online. Though HTML5 has some features which allow us to store content offline as well, but mostly it is online. Imagine if you're running a website, you have to be online. The same way for HTML5 as well. Now, another interesting feature, so far you have seen so many points we talked about which were not so much in favor of HTML5. The next one is something which makes HTML5 so powerful. And that is, if you use native applications, they are typically, to roll out, they are slow and painful. Now, let's take an example. If I built an iOS app and I put it in an app store, Apple might take somewhere from 7 to 15 days to approve the app. That's first rollout, which is slow. In the case of Android, you can be lucky and you can expect your application to be available in about 24 hours. In case of Microsoft, it depends on 3 to 5 days. Now, that's one. But if you look at rollout, any application typically is not perfect in the first shot. Since it is not perfect in the first shot, you need to roll out updates. And that's where the native problems are a big problem. Because every time you update, there will be some people who will update, some people will stay on the older one, and then you will have multiple version problems. At the same time, let's say if you have built up an app, which is an iOS, Android, and Windows, and then you discover that there's a update required on all these, you'll have to work on all of these three apps to roll out again, to update them again, which is again a very time-consuming process, and it takes up a lot of time and energy for the organization. In case of hybrid, it is again the same problem because finally hybrid apps do get installed and user can choose not to update them. At the same time, the hybrid applications also have some HTML5 component inside that, so that portion can be updated without any hiccup. Okay, I just got a message, not able to hear. Are you able to hear? Can some of you confirm? You might be on mute. Okay. I think some of us can hear, so please check you that you're not, you're not muted the conference. In that case, you'll not be able to hear. I'll continue here. So now let's talk about the next one. And so in HTML5, let's talk about rollout HTML5. Why it is so fast? See, finally, HTML5 is completely server-driven, mobile optimized website. So there is actually no rollout. The moment you have fixes, you roll out on your server, and anybody who sees that website after that, you will see the new version. So you will never have a multi-version problem, unlike in the case of native and hybrid. Let's talk about security. The security-wise, native applications are very, very good. They're very high. You can do your inbuilt security the way you like it. In hybrid, since we have HTML5 components, the security can be, compromised. But in HTML5, there is actually not much of security because your application can have cookies and all that, and which can be shared across the applications, and data can be captured. So this is where I am big fond of native applications. I know they are painful, but they are actually very secure. So if you're thinking from enterprise mobility perspective, natives are better as per me as of today. Having said that, there are other parameters which can change your decision. But if we have no constraint about the budget and the time frame, native apps are probably the best. Now let's look at a couple of more things available here. So best for native apps are best for games. So if you want a game on HTML5, probably you will not be able to make a attractive game. If you look at native, if you look at all the top 5, top 10 games on any of the app store, they're all native applications. Now let's look at one more case. So games and low content, things which are static content are perfect for native. Having said that, when you want to look at something like as good as website, which content can be very dynamic, HTML5 is probably a better solution simply because it's dynamic content. HTML5 is meant for dynamic rendering. It gets data from server, so whatever gets updated, it can keep on fetching that. So HTML5 has its own strengths, for your requirements. Tools-wise, we have a lot of tools available for all the 3 options. For native, you can use Xcode, you can use Eclipse. For hybrid, you can use PhoneGap, Worklight, Kony. There are many more providers. If you need more information about who can help you with what tools you can use for hybrid, please contact us. And for HTML5, again, whatever you can do for web, you can do for HTML5. But again, there are many interesting applications people have built, like Just in Mind, App Cooker, for building prototypes for HTML5, even for native. Moving on to the next one. So from the description above, this is the key takeaway. So when you look at native, you get better user experience. It's platform specific, and it's a oldest path or proven path for building mobile apps. In hybrid, what do you try? You try to compromise. You try to reduce your development effort. At the same time, you want to build for multiple platforms. And in case of HTML5, you quickly build, roll out, update, roll out, and keep doing it, which can work on any platform. Now, the one after this, we'll talk about the decision making. This is a very important slide. If your business is thinking about, starting an enterprise mobility initiative, this is something which can help you a lot. So this looks like a very complex decision making process. Fortunately, it is not. So I'll try to explain it very quickly, and I think it will be very straightforward from there. So the first thing which you want to do when you want to look at enterprise mobility initiative is ROI. What is the return on investment? Is it really an experiment, or you're confident that it will produce you good results provided it is done well? If you're confident it is a significant ROI, my personal suggestion is that go for native. Straight away, it's worth the investment, it's worth the time, do it. But if you're not sure about ROI of your mobile enterprise mobility initiative, then you have to think about more questions. So if I'm not sure, do I want to start with multiple platforms, or do I start with multiple platforms, or are I going to focus on one platform only? Because generally speaking, we would suggest that if you're not sure about ROI, A lot of businesses we have seen, they tend to go after multiple platforms, which probably is not a best idea because you might end up making the same mistake in both or multiple platforms, which will be hard to rectify. So we suggest if you perceive your ROI, you're experimenting, start with one platform. But anyway, in either case, if you choose one platform, I'm again directing you towards, go to native. Native is the best way. But in case you are thinking that, there is a large chance, there's a significant chance that your ROI will be significant, if not very large, you can choose to go for multiple platforms as well. And in that case, your next question is that, what is your budget? I mean, does your budget support supporting multiple platforms? Can you build so many native applications? If the answer is no, you do not have any budget constraints, you have sufficient budget, then I would again recommend you to go towards native. But if you have budget constraints, then let's look at more questions. Let's look at whether you have time constraints. If you have a go-to-market strategy already in place and you want to go to market, let's say in next 6 weeks or 8 weeks, depending on your application scope, then you would rather go to a hybrid kind of an approach. But if you do not have much of time constraint, in that case, if I do not have much time constraint, but I have native features, then you have to again go towards native. But if you have all of these, if you have budget constraint, if you have time constraint, in actually either case you can come to HTML5. And if you do not require native features, in that case you can go for HTML5, which is the fastest to build, cheapest to roll out, and also it does not depend on native features. Moving on to the next one. So this is a trend which based on again VentureBeat data, we have found out that about 53% of the people, they start HTML5. So they experiment, they build some HTML5, and they eventually, if they need to move, they move on. Because the experiment in HTML5 is much lesser expensive as compared to a native or hybrid application. The other one, which is again a most popular approach as per me, is that if you are building native, don't build for all the platforms, start with one, roll it out, see the consumer behavior. You have a lot of analytics tool to see the consumer behavior. Use that to identify, improve your app. Once it is really in good shape, then you roll out the same thing on multiple platforms. And then 13% of the people actually, they build up, they do not have any constraint, or they build for everything. They build for iOS, Android, and also web. So web is nothing but again HTML for HTML5. And then there are very few cases. One of those I can remember now is that Flipboard was one when it started for I think for several months or even more than a year. They stuck to one platform, did not release their platform on any other, other than iOS. So that's one of those examples. I'm sure there are many more people, but this is not something which is a commonly traveled route as far as enterprise mobility development is concerned. Now let's talk about how Saxon Global can help. It's just a brief slide. So what I wanted to communicate here is that we have significant mobility expertise, and we do not work just as developers. We identify your mobility needs, we recommend, and we strategize. We do it all. If you are thinking of mobility initiative in your organization, please talk to some of our people, and I'm sure they will give you some very, very interesting inputs. We'll be happy to get that. With this, I'll conclude this, and I move on to Q&A. And now feel free to raise questions you might have. So I see one question from Swati. I think she's already left. Is there a way which can be decided at the surety of choosing the development platform? You can see that in the graph here. I've tried to explain exactly how you can do that. This is exactly what we have tried to define, almost for sure. Out of these routes, there is nothing right and wrong, but this is the most recommended method when you are building it. Any more questions?
Hi all. If you have any further questions, you can also type it on Join Me. Yes, VP Rach. Yes, Rachna. Please type your questions there, and Sachin will answer the same.
Okay, so typical time frame required to develop an app actually depends a lot on the scope of the application. What are you doing? But from my experience, I have seen that most of the applications can be done in 2 to 6 months time. Um, depend on the complexity. If it is a large initiative, it might take some time, up to 12 months as well. But you should be able to get going with some version at some platforms in easily 2 to 6 months of time. I hope I answered your question. If you have more questions, please feel free to raise now.
Well, it seems we do not have any further questions, but in case you do, please contact Sachin at sachin.g@saxonglobal.com. Thank you so much for joining us for the webinar today, and I hope we've answered to most of your doubts and questions here. Thank you so much.